Hey, Earthlings, welcome to another episode of Still Alive. And as you can see, we are. Well, I am. Can you confirm that you're still alive, Ronnie?
Yes, I am. And people might have been a bit worried about us because we haven't done one of these shows for a little while. They might have been wondering if, in fact, we were still alive, but we are indeed. And
I did get one private message saying, "Are you okay?"
Yeah, they've been thinking, shit. Where are they?
I'm still alive, but badly injured. I know it's skin thing, but that's a plaster because I bought a new razor because I don't like using plastic ones. So I get one with with the blades, the old-fashioned blades.
Oh, the old-fashioned ones, yeah.
Yeah, and I got a new one today, and the first thing I did is cut my finger with it.
Oh dear, well, you're supposed to shave your face, not your hand, Roger.
Yeah, I know, but it's very hairy at the moment.
Yeah, I've got a friend of mine in Spain. He sent me a message recently, a chap called Alex, and he sent a picture of some razors that he'd bought that are they're disposable razors. Well, sort of like ones you don't use very much before you need another one, so to speak. And they've actually got bamboo handles rather than plastic.
Yeah, so you're still throwing away
You're still throwing them away. So yeah. the one you use, like you do, is obviously the best. Or what you could do is be like me and grow a beard, and then you don't have to bother with any razor.
When are you going to start doing that, Ronnie?
Well, it's just been. I've just had a haircut and everything, so it's quite short at the moment.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah,
it's there though. I'll just trim it.
You're bragging about a beard that nobody can see.
I trim it with the scissors. Yeah, it's an invisible beard.
Okay, well, we're still alive, people, and to make it official, let's go for this. So, Ronnie, this is going to be your program, really, in the sense that you're talking about the sinking of the STOW. So I'm assuming the STOW is a ship. Is that right?
No, well, it was the flagship of the British Greyhound Racing industry.
It was a ship at one time.
No, they regarded it as a flagship.
Yeah.
The STOW, it's Walthamstow Stadium, which is in was I suppose in kind of northeast London area. And
would it have been in Walthamstow by any chance?
It's in Walthamstow, yeah, and so that's why it was called the STOW, because it was called the STOW by the Greyhound Racing people, because it was Walthamstow. And basically this is the story of a very successful campaign that was mounted against the stadium, and what the implications of that campaign really are for the animal liberation movement as a whole, and what we can all learn from it, I suppose. Basically the kind of history of it was like I kind of I got involved in campaigning against the Greyhound racing industry. Well, both Louise and I did, in the kind of mid to late 1990s. And basically what happened, we adopted a greyhound, and we got involved in greyhound rescue. We basically got involved in home check-in for a greyhound rescue organization, and doing a bit of transportation of the dogs. And I kind of I started looking into it. Why are all these dogs needing homes? Why are all these dogs being disposed of? And I discovered that there was a horrendous problem of of not just dogs needing homes, but actually, dogs actually being killed because of the greyhound racing industry. And at the time, nobody was campaigning in the UK against greyhound racing. They were in the USA. Strange enough, it seems that sort of most campaigns against the sort of various areas of the oppression of other animals seem to have started in the UK.
Yeah, this is the other way around.
But this started in the UK, and in fact the US started in the USA. In fact, the USA campaign against dog racing over there has been highly successful. There are only two operating dog tracks left in the USA now, and there used to be dozens and dozens. And that campaign over there has been so successful that that's what's happened. And so because of that, we decided, well, look, there's no campaign against dog racing here in the UK, so let's start one. And so we formed a group called Greyhound Action, and it started in a really small way, and then gradually over the years it got bigger and bigger until it was kind of at the kind of towards the end of the 13 years I spent doing it, I was probably working about 80 hours a week on it. There was so much interest in it, and so many people involved.
You must have got loads of money for that, Ronnie.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I was able to retire to a luxury accommodation in the Barbados, actually, where I'm calling from today, of course. No, it was all entirely voluntary, and in fact, we operated it on a shoestring budget. We had and we didn't. We weren't employed. We didn't take any money for ourselves from it, and everything we got was spent on real materials, on posters and leaflets and banners and stuff like that. But this was with regard to Walthamstow. There was a basically how it all started was that what we were doing with Greyhound Action, we'd stage the occasional big protest outside a dog track, and we'd have certain days of action throughout the year. There was one where we'd have people, all over the country outside betting shops, giving out leaflets, encouraging people not to, not to bet on dog racing, because the dog racing industry receives a certain amount of revenue from bets that are placed on greyhound racing. So we had that.
But you had national things, you're saying, yeah?
Yeah, where, throughout the country where people did.
So Deb's got a kind of organizational question for you. If it was before kind of social media, how did you kind of spread it around the news?
Well, basically just through very, very useful publication for us was Arc News.
Oh, yeah.
Which was run by a guy called Neil Lee.
Yeah.
And that was mailed out to animal rights campaigners all over the country, and we used to have stuff in Arc News about Greyhound Action, about how people get involved and where to contact. And I think the sort of news of it just kind of, but we did stalls at vegan fairs all over the place as well. So that's how we do it, because it was only really right at the tail end of the campaign, at tail end of Greyhound Action, that social media really started to play a part in anything.
If you say did a couple of vegan fairs before, you'd actually produce a couple of one-sided leaflets advertising.
That's right. And we had a newsletter, and there'll be an example of this that you'll put on the screen pretty soon, of a newsletter that we used to mail out. And I think it got to, at one time, we were sending about 2,000 every time it came out. It came out probably about 3 or 4 times a year. And of course, in the newsletter, we'd have a kind of leaflets in the newsletter about forthcoming events, where anything kind of on a big scale, that was happening at a national level, we'd have information about that in this leaflet that we put in the newsletter. And that's kind of how it, that's kind of how
that was going out in the post, right? So
it was going out in the post. Yeah, we eventually got a website, and I think the newsletter went online as well. So what happened was, I think we were still mailing newsletters out to people that didn't have internet access. But you know, it was fewer because people with internet access were able to look at it online, and we encouraged them to do that because obviously that was less expensive for us. And then and basically what happened, that's the kind of way things was happening. And then there was it was just like one particular person really, and it's quite often about where I think the importance of kind of, in a sense, perhaps accepting sort of criticism, or accepting people's suggestions about how things should happen, because there was a woman down in southeast London called Jo Cridlin, and she kind of started a campaign against the stadium at Wimbledon, and that was also a very prestigious dog track, because that's where they used to hold the Greyhound Derby. And what she started to do was not just do like an occasional sort of really big protest there, but what she started doing was going there regularly, going there pretty much every Saturday with just a few other people, and they they had banners and placards, but they gave out leaflets to people about what happened to the greyhounds, and encouraging people not to go to the dog racing, because the dog racing industry relies a lot on people kind of going back, people going for the first time and then getting a taste for it and then continuing to go. That's a big part of their how they're able to continue. And she sort of suggested, well, why weren't we encouraging other people to do this in other parts of the country, and it would be a good idea to do that. And we kind of took that idea on board, and what we started to do was encouraging local animal rights groups where they had a dog track in their area to try to do these regular demonstrations outside the tracks, where they'd be leafleting the people going in to try to encourage them not to go again. In fact, some people didn't even go. Some people, didn't even go in the first time. Once the campaigner spoke to them and gave them leaflets, there were some people that actually kind of turned away and didn't go in. But the idea was really to stop people going again, because we sort of appreciated that people probably already paid for their tickets. They were going for a night out with their mates. It would be probably very difficult to stop them on that occasion. But the idea was to create a situation where they would never go back again. And really the campaign against the stadium Walthamstow followed on from that, and it was part of a campaign we launched called Winning Words, and it was and the winning words were really the words that were on the leaflet that educated people about the plight of the dogs, the hands of the racing industry. And the local animal rights campaigners in the Walthamstow area, they launched a campaign against the dog track there, against Walthamstow Stadium. And it was kind of and it might be a time to bring up a photo of you got a photo there of the stadium itself, or the outside of the stadium when it was. Yeah, I mean, that's it sinking. That's what it looked like when dog racing was taking place there. It kind of does look quite impressive, I suppose, with that big, the big facade.
I don't know. I think it's got a very peculiar look about it.
It looks very strange. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's sort of Art Deco, isn't it? It's
like 1960s, but it looks like a car park as well, doesn't it? It's all those grills.
That's what that is. There is like an area of grass in front of the stadium. But you see, the thing about Walthamstow, there was something very particular about Walthamstow that isn't the case with other dog tracks, and that is that the most dog tracks have car parks within the stadium. So it does look sort of kind of. I think it's got a kind of Art Deco look, which is like a kind of 1920s sort of look, isn't it? That's what it kind of reminds me of.
Well, when I first saw it, I was looking at those kind of wheels. It looked like they were trying to, I don't know, do some kind of weird tape recorder kind of look about it or something. It was all a bit.
Yeah, I mean, they used to have they used to have Speedway there as well. Whether the wheels are to do with that, I kind of don't really know.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But I mean, basically, like I said, most dog tracks have their have a car park within the stadium. Within the the kind of wall or fence of the stadium. So you get a lot of people just driving in. So it's difficult to give leaflets to everyone. And so in those circumstances, it's important to have banners and placards to try to educate people, because you're not going to be able to give leaflets. Some cars stop and take leaflets, and there are some people on foot. But with Walthamstow, the car park was across the road from the stadium. So everybody attending the races had to walk into the stadium.
Oh, that was handy then, wasn't it?
So it was really, really handy for leafleting. And although occasionally people would, go outside there with placards, mostly they didn't. And mostly all it was people outside giving leaflets to the racegoers and Walthamstow. And what happened was that after that had been going on for just 12 months, the stadium actually announced it was closing because it was no longer financially viable. And because and a big reason for that was because the attendances had been reduced so much as a result of people giving leaflets to the racegoers, that they kind of the thing about dog racing is financially it's very precarious anyway in the UK, and because there's just a lack of interest in it anyway, and the really the dog racing industry has never recovered from the legalization of high street betting, which took place in the 1960s. Prior to the 1960s, the only place where anyone could place a bet on
Was it the actual track?
dogs or even on horses was actually at the track. You see, so that encouraged big attendances. And in fact, I think that the record attendance for dog racing was something like about, I think it was something as high as about 70,000, which was kind of way back. I think that might have been in the 50s or 60s. It was certainly before this legislation came in, and that was at a track at White City, which was in West London. But then obviously when people didn't have to go to the track to bet on the dogs or even on the horses, that caused a big decline in attendances, and so it hit their finances very hard, particularly the dog racing industry, because that it was financially sort of less viable really than horse racing. And so they were already
I was going to ask you that though, because you're familiar with Bernie Wright's Irish campaign, and you know that they're bailed out by the state. So how come that didn't happen in Britain then?
It just didn't. I think the state didn't regard the dog racing industry as important enough to bail out. Whether in Ireland it's kind of there's, I think kind of perhaps in Ireland, kind of rural matters have more of an influence on the government than they do here. I mean, they do have a big influence here because obviously, in the UK,
some campaigners claim that it's because the industry managed to tie the greyhound racing subsidies with horse racing, and so
it could be. But even here in the UK, the horse racing doesn't get subsidised either from the state. Neither are subsidised in the UK. They both get a levy on bets placed on races. In betting shops, wherever anyone bets on the races, there's a levy. So it's kept alive by bet, not just by attendances, but by betting as well. But it's not supported by the state in the same way as it is in Ireland. And it might be because is it regarded in Ireland as being some sort of kind of rural activity? I mean, certainly the tracks are in are in urban areas, aren't they? But the kind of the breeding of the
I suppose
greyhounds.
they could try and sell it as some kind of culturally significant event.
Yeah, you see, Ireland's a huge breeding centre for greyhounds. Probably at least at least 3/4 of greyhounds that race in the UK are from Ireland, are from the Irish Republic, are bred in the Irish Republic. You know only quite a small number are actually bred in the UK. So it's a big breeding centre for.
Yeah,
for
Deb's
greyhounds.
saying it's tied up with tourism as well, and the local economy. I suppose it got to show, going back to Ireland, how powerful the horse and greyhound lobbies are in terms of
Yes,
their grip on politics, I suppose.
I mean the government. The government in the UK will step in to support what you might call the industries of animal oppression. They certainly do with they certainly do with animal farming with subsidies that make animal products cheaper. And obviously with the vivisection industry, we've seen how the government have stepped into to save Huntingdon Life Sciences, for instance, and and we're very proactive in persecuting anti-vivisection activists. So they will in some industries, but they didn't with. So
it's a bit weird that they didn't then, really, isn't it?
Well, I think those industries just weren't powerful enough. Didn't have enough influence on the governments, because we've seen the same. We've seen the same with with circuses. Circuses with that have certainly animals that kind of classed as wild animals. There's been a massive decline in those circuses. Through campaigning and protests, and the government didn't step in to protect them either.
Interesting.
And I think they just don't have the clout to kind of put pressure on the government in the same way that, say, the pharmaceutical industry has, or the animal farming industry has. I think that's probably the reason.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. You probably got this point lined up. So do you want to come back to this, or do you want to take this now?
No. I think that's been increasingly been the case, and in fact, you kind of. I mean, I'm not so in touch with the greyhound racing campaign as I was, because other people took it over and actually really took it to new heights, and they've the people that are running it now have had they've continued to kind of play a big part in the tracks closing, but yes, I mean, kind of what happened was there was something brought in called I don't know, it's got the same name. It's called BAGS, BAGS, which was Bookmakers Afternoon Greyhound Services or something, where they staged these races during the day, and they didn't care if no one went. I mean, if races during the daytime, you're going to get very few people going because people are at work. But the idea of that was to stream the races into into betting shops, and to stream them online, for bets to be placed. And so this is an example of the betting industry keeping greyhound racing alive.
Yeah, I suppose it makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Right. Do you want to move on, or?
Yeah. Well, actually, what happened? So basically, the dog track, announced that. I mean, what happened, and really what has happened, where these where the greyhound tracks have closed, where there's been campaigns against them, is really that you've got a situation where these tracks are in financial difficulties anyway, so it doesn't take much of a drop in attendance to actually push them over, and the people outside, giving out the leaflets or whatever, or with the banners and placards encouraging the race goers not to go again, actually were able to just push those attendances below that threshold, so the tracks were no longer kind of really economically viable. And so the owners of the tracks, or the owners of the land, were seeking to kind of make their money elsewhere, and most of these places have gone for house building, and that's what happened with Walthamstow. It was bought by a London Quadrant that are a house building company, and there are now where the track actually was. There are now there's now housing. I think probably mostly flats.
Oh, right. I got that wrong then, because I thought because Bernie was asking me about it today, and I thought it was going to make it into a shopping centre, but it's a
well, there are shops there, and there's a gym there, and there are other facilities there as well. But it's not. It's mainly housing. I think it's mainly flats.
Suppose in this day and age, an area of land that size could be used, like multi-purpose, whereas it was just a Greyhound racing stadium at one point, and so
it was just a dog track. I mean, in fact, you've got I think you've got a photo there of what it's like now.
Yeah, I could bring that up if you like.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's skip past these. That's it.
Yeah, that's what it's like now from the inside, and that board that you can see the back of that facade that was at the front of the stadium. Well, yeah. as part of the kind of planning permission to build to turn it into housing, the developers had to agree to keep that facade because it was regarded as kind of iconic.
So yeah, but it's horrible looking though, isn't it?
Yeah, but for some reason, because it's got this kind of history to it, that was part of the deal. You see, so at the front of it, it still says Walthamstow Stadium. It still says that at the front. If you see that, that kind of board. You see, what they did was at the back of that sign saying Walthamstow Stadium was a kind of scoreboard where they gave the results of the races. and it's the back of that you can see, and the front of that is still the same facade that says Walthamstow Stadium, except that it's no longer a Greyhound track; it's a housing, it's a housing development.
Walthamstow Stadium housing.
Yeah. So that's
I'm assuming the answer to this is it was privately owned, was it?
It was privately owned. Yeah, I mean, obviously the people that owned it sold it to the housing company, and kind of probably made good their losses. It's no longer viable as a dog track, so let's make some money and sell it to a housing company, and that's what happened. And that's really what's happened to most of the dog tracks that are closed throughout the country have gone for housing.
I think that's the same with Harold's Cross in Ireland, I think.
Yeah, well. I think I think in Ireland, I think not so many. I think obviously the dog racing industry is stronger. Well, but particularly in the Irish Republic, where the government it gets bailed out by the government.
Yeah.
But it's normally the case. One exception is Wimbledon. Wimbledon Stadium, where this kind of campaign began of, regularly going outside the tracks. That's now a football ground. It's the ground of AFC Wimbledon Football Club. So that's an exception to the housing. It's a football ground.
Yeah. There's two of them because they moved, didn't they?
Well, interesting enough, they moved down the road because basically what happened was Wimbledon Football Club had a stadium just down in the same road as the dog track, just down the road. And that was sold. I don't know whether that went for shopping or housing, and that was sold. And the football club had to relocate to Milton Keynes. And
Milton Keynes, yeah, that's right. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. And a lot of the local supporters, in Wimbledon, were like really upset, and then they formed their own.
So there's two Wimbledons now, isn't there? There's two.
No, one's the original one. Need some more tea. The original one is called Milton Keynes Dons now. And they changed their name. They relocated.
Yeah, they're the ones who won the FA Cup and all that, weren't they? And so okay.
Yeah, when they were called Wimbledon.
When they were called Wimbledon.
Then some kind of supporters formed a club called AFC Wimbledon. that played, and they were ground sharing with some
Anyway, I imagine this is a bit.
We're talking about football now instead of racing. Anyway, that's what happened. It's now a football.
Perhaps you ought to get back to
the greyhound racing. Yeah, and you see what's kind of interesting about this is that people will say, oh, there were people holding it was these protests outside these dog tracks that kind of forced the dog tracks to close, and people will say, well, this was a protest campaign, and they're kind of like a pressure campaign. But in reality, it kind of wasn't. This was a campaign of education. This was to do with education. This was to do with educating ordinary people about, what was wrong with dog racing, so those ordinary people would no longer support it. And so because the ordinary people no longer supported it, then there'd be a lack of finance for that particular dog track, and the dog track would close. And of course, the knock-on effect of that is that fewer greyhounds are bred for racing, because it's a supply and demand situation. In other words, like I said, that most of these dogs are bred in Ireland. Now, and basically what happens is about 50% of greyhounds that are bred for the racing industry never make it to the tracks because they're considered not to be suitable, one reason or another, not suitable for racing. And really almost all of them are killed. The greyhounds that you see people out walking with, the so-called, rescued greyhounds, they're really almost all greyhounds that have had a racing career, so to speak. They're dogs that have raced on the tracks, have kind of retired, and then they're found homes, or some of them have found homes. And those are the ones. What people don't realize is that there's this really large number of dogs that are killed before, as basically really as puppies, as young dogs. And that happens in Ireland. But the demand for the majority demand for those dogs to be bred, I don't know what the situation now is, but certainly like at the time of this campaign, the UK or British greyhound racing industry was bigger than the Irish one, and so more dogs were bred in Ireland to be supplied to the British industry than to supply to the Irish industry. So the British industry was responsible for a very large number of these dogs being killed, and at one time it was something like between 10 and 20,000 a year. It was like a huge number because of the demand created by the British greyhound racing industry for dogs to be bred, and the fact that 50%, almost around about 50% of those dogs were being killed. It was a huge number, and we estimated that the Walthamstow track, when it was operating, was responsible for the slaughter of over 500 greyhounds a year through the demand it created for these dogs to be bred, and then subsequently half of those dogs being put to death. So by actually
in
closing
terms of that, Bryn's asking how. I spoke to, there was a variety
they'd often be killed. The young dogs would be killed by breeders, and all sorts of methods, shot through the head, drowned. It would probably be very rare that they'd be taken to a vet to be killed, because of course that's expensive. So I'd say not very pleasant methods would be used to there's stories of greyhounds being taken to slaughterhouses to be killed, and money exchanging hands for the greyhounds to be killed by the slaughterhouse workers, and there's all sorts of stuff like that.
It's an interesting question from Deb, because what was this kind of like? Did they kind of propose kind of welfare measures?
Well,
it's not really been abolished, has it? It's just moved, I suppose.
Well, basically, yeah. I mean, what happened was, because we had a kind of falling out with the League Against Cruel Sports, in a sense, because the League Against Cruel Sports launched this campaign for more money for the greyhound racing industry to put more money into welfare. See, and they said we want like, you know, a penny in the pound or something of money earned by the dog racing industry to go into welfare, right? Which I don't know quite what would have meant. Perhaps more retirement homes for dogs or something like that. And we kind of we sort of objected to this, because we said, well, look, you know, this doesn't, you know, you're not tackling that. You're not tackling the main problem. You know, the main problem with dog racing, really, the number one problem is all these young dogs being killed before they even race. And, you know, providing increased welfare measures for racing dogs or for dogs retired from racing doesn't tackle, you know, the major part of the problem. And so, you know, what we felt was that, you know, this measure from, you know, by the League Against Cruel Spots, campaign by the League Against Cruel Spots, was actually, you know, kind of perpetuating dog racing, because we felt that people would see this and think, well, look, you know, there's some nasty things going on with greyhound racing, but everything's going to be all right soon, because the League Against Cruel Sports have got this campaign.
They're going to take the cruelty out of it.
So therefore I can go to the dog racing with a clear conscience. And it's very similar, really, to what the RSPCA are doing with this kind of RSPCA assured scheme of, you know, these farms where people think, oh, I can buy these animal products with a clear conscience because the RSPCA have given their stamp of approval to this particular place. But of course, those animals are still being sent for slaughter, you know, and so that actually harms. I feel that harms attempts to educate people to become vegan, because people think they've got some kind of escape clause, escape route, and we felt this was
just let me stop you there, Ronnie, because we've been going 37 minutes. I think that's the first time we've mentioned the word vegan, which must be a record for our show.
Yeah. I think it's definitely for me, yes, but it's relevant, you know, it is relevant to you know, to veganism and campaigning to veganism. And this is kind of really what I'm coming on to. You see, so every time a dog track closes, what that means, if there are fewer races, so fewer dogs are needed, so there's less demand for dogs to be bred, and so fewer dogs are bred, and because fewer dogs are bred, fewer dogs end up being killed. And that is exactly the same as, you know, regarding animal farming, and indeed the fishing industry. It's a supply and demand. You know, what we were doing was tackling demand. This was a campaign that tackled demand, because we were reducing the demand. You know, we were reducing the demand of ordinary people for dog racing, you see, and it's because we reduced that demand, so it ended up with the supply of dogs being reduced. And because we reduced the supply of dogs, that meant fewer of those dogs ended up being killed. And it is exactly the same with vegan outreach. In other words, what we're trying to do is reduce the demand, you know, so people don't, you know, people don't consume animal products, don't purchase animal products. And that then has a knock-on effect of fewer animals being reared, certainly with animal farming, fewer animals being reared for slaughter. So those animals, in effect, are spared from being slaughtered. The same way it's been slaughtered, the same way as these 500 greyhounds a year, over 500 greyhounds a year, that were being killed because of the existence of Walthamstow Stadium, and now no longer being killed because that stadium has gone, or there's no longer dog racing there. So there's a very close parallel. This is like a microcosm, really. You know, this campaign that we waged against the dog tracks is a kind of microcosm of vegan outreach. Really, it's just like a smaller version, but it's the principle is exactly the same. And this is where I'm saying that the animal liberation movement can learn from this. You know, the effectiveness of education. This was an educational campaign, educating ordinary people, and was like kind of, you know, was highly successful. And I think it kind of, you know, casts a light on what can be successful in the much larger area, obviously, of of animal farming and indeed the fishing industry, because the same is the case. If we reduce the consumption of fishes by people, that's going to have a knock-on effect on the industry, isn't it? And then fewer fishes will be caught, and there'll be less slaughter.
Let's pursue that movement issue. So you don't regard this one as a pressure campaign, but in a sense, could elements of it be a pressure campaign? For example, some of the activists, I mean, I can just hear, Jake Conroy saying this. Some of the activists could have been pressuring the companies that supplied the Greyhound Stadium. And so then you've got both, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, that didn't actually happen. I mean, there were elements.
No, but it could have happened, couldn't it? Could have happened.
It could have happened. Yeah, I mean, it didn't. Yeah. It didn't kind of form part of our campaign, but it couldn't happen. But essentially, what was it that was keeping dog racing going? What was keeping dog racing going was the money. When the money from it's money from two sources that keeps dog racing going. One is the people paying to go in to watch the dog racing, and the money they spend at the track, the money they spend on meals there, the money they spend at the bar, that helps to keep it going. And plus the money, the money from the bets, the percentage of bets, the levy on bets as well. Those are the two things that keep the dog racing industry going. And then also you could say maybe money from bookmakers or streaming services that want to stream the races so that people bet. So once again, that's down to the bets, because if people didn't bet, then those services wouldn't operate, or they wouldn't operate so much. That's what keeps them going. So if you affect that, if you cut that, then and you do that sufficiently, then they're going to go under. And that's actually what happened. It's you're kind of, it was a demand focused campaign. It wasn't focused on supply; it's focused on demand, because that's essentially, what was keeping and what still is keeping dog racing going.
Now, Malcolm here is saying that the RSPCA are abolitionists now when it comes to greyhound racing.
I know the League Against Cruel Sports are now, because they changed their tune eventually and became totally against dog racing. So that's good, because
again,
I don't know about the RSPCA. That may well be true of the RSPCA now.
Yeah, but if we're talking about, well, this could be a kind of, I don't know, a microcosm of what could be going on in terms of vegan education, in terms of local and grassroots and all that. So in the sense that the RSPCA must be making the argument then that it's because this industry cannot be made non-cruel, which is their interest.
Well, if that is the case with the RSPCA, I mean, I must admit, I don't know what the RSPCA's position is. I know the League Against Cruel Sports are now totally against dog racing.
It'd be the same with the flesh industry then. And
well, you see, the thing that, probably what the RSPCA is, you see, what one major concern regarding dog racing is the number of injuries on the track, and the number of dogs that are either killed on the track or end up, being killed by vets.
I think there's quite a few injuries in a slaughterhouse, Ronnie.
Well, yeah, I mean, absolutely, it's injuries that lead to death, of course. But you see, I think that's kind of, you see, it's impossible to.
I know what you're getting at. Yeah, it's a more kind of RSPCA area.
It's more RSPCA thing would be to, a lot of people focus. It's a bit like the horse racing, that people focus on, say at the entry, the Grand National, these horses killed. But what a lot of people don't realise, and what isn't focused on enough, is with horse racing, you've got exactly the same problem as greyhound racing. In other words, that a huge number of horses are killed before they even race, because they're judged not to be suitable, and then you get another load that are killed after they've finished racing, because you don't get, greyhounds that finish their racing days have got some chance of finding a home, although there's still a lot of them that don't. But when a horse has, horses finish their racing days, then, where are they going to go? What's going to happen to a highly strung, thoroughbred horse and suitable for, to be ridden as some kind of riding pony? Are they, or anything like that?
No, you're not going to find them at the local
So
gym.
they go to the horse meet unless they've, done, been a top prize winner and can go to stud. They're killed. So it's even worse with horse racing. It's a very, very similar situation, whereas a lot of focus is on the injuries. There were so many horses were killed, like at Cheltenham. You say how many there was all these horses killed again on the track over the jumps and everything. But that isn't that, and that's terrible. That's shocking. But that isn't the main problem. The main problem, with both dog racing and greyhound racing, is the number of these animals that are killed before they even race because they're judged not to be suitable. And that's the main problem. And every time, and every track contributes to that. Every track causes that to happen because the demand that they create for dogs or horses to be supplied for the races. You see, so if you close a track, then you reduce the number of races. Because you reduce the number of races, you reduce that demand. You reduce the amount of dogs or horses that are bred, and so you reduce the number that are put to death.
Bryn raises an interesting one. Preferred species, of course. I mean, this is in relation to the RSPCA, and of course that is true of the RSPCA, that they are looking for or at the species who are kind of favoured in society, if you like. Because vegans are confused about the RSPCA currently, because they would say, well, look, if you can be abolitionist about greyhound racing, why can't you be abolitionist about the flesh trade? And of course, the RSPCA are never going to do that, right? It's a different issue for them. The different species are involved, but also I think that the RSPCA are going to say, well, look, flesh consumption is not going to end, so we've got to then figure out a way of regulating it, or kind of like giving them kind of accreditation, all these red tractors and all the rest of it and all that. And so it's a different ball game. So I think that's why the RSPCA won't take action against the flesh industry. They'll just try to do their best. Whereas I suppose once you've got an industry that is kind of sinking, then they might step in. But it's kind of going to be a little bit like the league, isn't it? First of all, their instinct is to try and regulate it.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
When they saw tracks were closing, and when they kind of saw that our campaign was being successful, they thought maybe we can afford now to go totally against it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And that's what happened. Or perhaps we'll get more donations by being totally against it. If you want to be cynical about.
Yeah, I suppose you could do that as well.
Yeah. But certainly that's their position now, and of course we were really pleased about that, because that meant that because previous to that we felt that they were actually getting in the way of they were muddying the waters in terms of the message we were wanting to put out to people.
Shall we move on to your article, Ronnie?
Yes.
Okay. Whoops. There we go.
That's
right.
This is a sort of newsletter we produced for quite a few years.
I know you've got one in your hot sticky hand, and it's
I've got it on my screen actually. I don't think I've got printed.
It's difficult to read, so I split it in two. So
I mean, basically, this is the article we published. It is in the June/July edition, 2008 of this newsletter, which was called Running for Their Lives, as you can see.
12 months is actually quite a short campaign.
It's a short period. Well, most of them haven't been as short as that.
No.
There was a campaign against the track actually that was the best attended. Certainly back in those days, was actually Bellevue in Manchester. And the campaign to close that took 15 years. And I remember going there, going to one, and at Bellevue, the car park was inside the stadium. So, people would have the banners and placards as well as the leaflets there. And I remember going there on one of the when they started the campaign to close Bellevue. I remember going on one of the earlier demonstrations, and about 8,000 people went into the place. There was thousands. It was that really depressing. But in the end, as it kind of, in more recent years, the attendance would down would be maybe often less than 1,000. They went down that much, over the years, and and in the end, that went for housing as well, because it was no longer economically viable to keep that track open. So it's now that's now gone for housing.
Walthamstow here, you mentioned it before, but it's also mentioned here the flagship. Why was this a flagship stadium?
Well, it was just a very, you regarded a very prestigious venue, and there was some high value races taking place there. And in the past there'd been big attendances, there in years gone by, and it was just regarded as like a really, really prestigious track. A bit like Ascot, Ascot for the horse racing. It was a bit like the Ascot of the dog racing industry. But once again, it relied on people going there, as to provide a large part of the revenue for the track. And once the attendances started falling, their financial problems became so great that the people running it, I think it was like a family-owned business that ran it. They just thought, well, let's sell and let's take the money and run, because we're not making any money out of the dog racing, and that's what happened.
I'm gonna be cheeky here. You see that comment on the politics of the movement? It says left campaigners outside the stadium. Left-wing campaigners outside the stadium. It doesn't say that. It says left campaigners outside.
Left campaign. Oh yes, that's just.
Yeah,
that's referring to the and that was quite rare, because you can see people with placards there outside the track, but they didn't usually do that. They mostly just gave out leaflets.
Wasn't that picture to celebrate the closure though? No, wasn't it?
Let me just see. No, I don't think so. I think that was a
all right,
that was a demonstration while the track was still open. So yeah, it was just talking about and towards the end of the article, it talks about there were 29 major tracks still remained in in the Greyhound Racing's flotilla of death. It's very kind of marine kind of focus, this article, isn't it?
Oh, is that what it's all about? Okay, yeah, right.
Yeah. It's sinking the what does it say? Campaigners torpedo Greyhound Racing's Bismarck. There we are.
All right, yeah. So they were really going for it, weren't they?
Right in their headlines.
Yeah, okay. Somebody said do a nautical theme. And
the nautical theme, yeah. But in this article, it says 29 major tracks still remain, because basically in dog racing in Britain split into certainly in Britain, because it's.
But is that still true? I mean, this is.
No. Basically, you've got
right. So
basically you had two types of tracks in dog racing in Britain. You had what they called licensed tracks, or official tracks, which came under the auspices of. It's now something called the Greyhound Board of Great Britain. And they were like the bigger tracks, and then you had these other tracks, independent tracks or flapping tracks, that were smaller tracks, and a lot of them were associated flapping, and a lot of them were associated with the mining industry.
Hang on, you've just gone past that twice. What do you mean flapping tracks?
That's what I don't know why they're called flapping tracks, but that's what they're called. Okay. Then these are the smaller independent tracks. And a lot of them were associated with the mining industry, and they operated in areas where they were coal mining. And so, in a sense, like Margaret Thatcher kind of did the greyhounds a favour when she kind of, started closing all the coal mines and stuff, because, kind of a lot of those tracks kind of went out of existence after that. When the coal mining stopped, and there were quite a few of those, because it mentions in this article that 29 major tracks still remain, but there are also a lot of these flapping tracks. So at the time of this article, probably the number of dog tracks in Britain was probably about 40, and now that is 21. There's only 21 left. There's 20 of the licensed tracks, and just one of the unlicensed ones, just one flapping track left now.
And to your knowledge, is there a campaign against them at the moment?
Oh yes. There's there are several organisations campaign. There's a group called Campaign Against Greyhound Exploitation and Death, and there's another one called Action for Greyhounds, and there might be others as well. There's a few groups that are campaigning against dog racing, and they've continued to sort of play a part in the tracks closing.
Okay, well, we're coming up on the hour, so I want to ask you some vegan related questions, since we all do.
That's surprising.
Unless you've got something more prepared that you want to say, have you?
No, it's just that, but basically, it's it's been a successful formula. I mean, there was a track that's just closed, actually, in Bedfordshire, a place called Henlow, and that's just closed. And just the other day, I think they had their last race meeting there. So this process is still continuing, of people going outside the tracks and educating people. And obviously, this was a very quick victory, 12 months, and usually they take longer than
usually
that.
They take years. I mean, the one against Shelburne has been running 30 years.
Oh yes, yeah. And as I said, the Bellevue one was at least 15 years, and that closed.
All right. Well, somebody's got an answer to the flapper thing. Flapper tracks refers to the way they would flap open and shut and reopen after law enforcement moved off. Oh, okay.
Yeah. I mean, that could be.
Okay.
I mean, Christine's very involved in the campaign against dog racing in the USA. Where I've said this, I think Christine probably confirmed this, and there's just 2 tracks operating there now. But you see, in the USA, they've got this thing called ballot measures, which is it's like a referendum. If you get enough signatures on a on a petition form, I think it's 100,000. When they have the elections in the USA, at like a state level, that you can have a ballot where people can, where it's a referendum. And in some of these states, they've held these these referendums on dog racing, and it's been banned in some states because people have voted to end it in the referendum, and that's something we don't have here. It's an extra way they've got of that.
Okay, well, let me get onto the movement questions, vegan related. The first one, Ronnie, given your position now about vegan education everywhere and all the time and all that, would you do it again?
Would I do this campaign again?
Yeah.
Well, if I had my time again, no. The answer to that, I think, is no. And really that also applies, shock horror, to the Animal Liberation Front as well. And the reason for that is because I mean, the ALF was was hugely successful in sparing millions of animals from suffering and slaughter. Hugely successful campaigns against animal experiments and against the fur trade in particular. Well, certainly here in the UK, and of course the campaign against dog racing, was hugely successful as well. We developed a formula that worked really well, and we also the other thing to say as well, we played a big part in stopping a lot of new tracks open during the time that we were operating with Greyhound Action. No new dog tracks opened, and yet people were constantly trying to open new tracks. And every time we heard about one, we launched a campaign to stop these tracks from opening, and a lot of that was to do with contacting local councillors in those areas, because these tracks would have to be given planning permission. And there was one in Liverpool that we we played a big part in stopping. There was one that was going to be opened by the guy that was in charge of Doc Martens. Doc Martens, the footwear company.
Yeah, now got a plant-based one.
Yeah. Finally, yeah. He wanted to open.
But the thing is, Ronnie, I asked you if you do it again. You said no, but then you gave all these reasons.
No. But the reason I wouldn't do it again wasn't because it was a successful campaign,
But doesn't that mean that it would be good for people to do this then as well?
The reason it's a question of good. It's a question of good and better. It's a question of good and better, you see. And like the ALF was good, the ALF was great. This was a great campaign. But I think to myself, yeah, this was great. This was really highly successful. But is there something else I could have done which would have been even better? It isn't a case of these things not being good. They were really, really good. And I feel that in terms of the in terms of the eventual achievement of widespread animal liberation, that I feel really that my time would have been better spent in carrying out and promoting vegan outreach, because that is really fundamental to everything. And I think that I think that in terms of other animals, being spared from suffering and slaughter, and in terms of progressing society to a situation of where we have widespread animal liberation, if I'd spent my time on that, on vegan outreach, I think even more would have been achieved. That's that's my view. It's not that these things, it's not that I'm in any way regret being involved in these campaigns. I don't, because that they achieved a great deal.
So a tangent from that, which is a bit trickier, because I think it's probably the case, it's been the case in the Shelburne campaign in Ireland, that non-vegans were involved, right? And then some of those non-vegans went vegan because of their involvement with this campaign. But then you've got a situation where some people will do this campaign, but they won't do vegan campaigning because either they're not vegan. So if we could almost separate people out in that sense, that would be good.
I think there's a couple of things to be said about that, or perhaps more than a couple of things. We had the same with this, but I mean, basically, where there was a campaign against a local dog track, that was pretty much always driven by the local animal rights groups. So you'd have that campaign would really be run by vegans, but non-vegans would be attracted to those campaigns. People that cared about dogs. It's very similar to kind of the situation with Camp Beagle. The campaign against MBR acres. The people that run that are vegan. And some of them have been vegan for pretty much almost as long as I have. But non-vegans get attracted to it because they care about dogs, and then through rubbing shoulders with vegans, they become vegan as well. And that's certainly what happened with our campaign. There'd be non-vegans. I know of people that became vegan because they were involved in this campaign. They got involved.
It means then, because if they're going to rub shoulders with vegans, it means that vegans have got to be involved. But that means, from your point of view, those vegans who are involved are not doing the best thing they could be doing.
Well, I think it's I think that veganism can still be promoted through these campaigns, because you see what we started doing, because we came to the realization that that the dog racing industry was part of a bigger picture, that the fundamental reason you had dog racing was because of speciesism, was because of human supremacism. So that had to be kind of challenged at a kind of deeper level, And so what we started to do was on our website, when you went to our website, one of the first things you saw was there was a big, quite a big part of the first page you went to that was promoting veganism. That basically said that dog racing is only one aspect of this oppression and exploitation of other animals by humans. And if you want to oppose all of it, then, the answer to that is to go vegan. And here's how you find out about going vegan. And we started having it on our leaflets as well. We started producing leaflets that had a section on them with a link where people could go to find out about veganism. So we ended up realizing that the importance of promoting veganism, we started doing that as well. So it can be, this is a way that I think veganism can be promoted like that, through single issue campaigns. And it's something like, there are people that are kind of attracted to to particular issues. A lot of people are kind of get very they're attracted to campaigning against animal experimentation, for instance. That's the thing that really gets them, and that's what they want to do.
Yeah,
and
it's a division of labor type thing. And I think the thing that has changed, right?
Yeah.
The thing that has changed over the years is that you don't now get any of the kind of single issues which are resistant to a vegan element of it. They're okay with the vegan element of it. So I think that's a bit of a change, but it still definitely means then that vegans are going to be diverted off to the single issues in order to be there for people to rub shoulders with in that kind of.
You see, there's kind of two aspects of it. I mean, obviously, if you've got vegans involved in the campaign, and the campaign is just focused on the single issue, and the campaign doesn't itself contain anything about veganism, that you are going to turn non-vegans vegan that get involved in that campaign. But what you've got to realize is that that's only people that's only campaigners. What about the vast number of members of the public that aren't campaigners and don't want to be campaigners? You're not going to turn them vegan through single issue campaigns. To turn them vegan, you've got to actually go out and do vegan outreach.
What do you respond to this argument that it would be better to have a complete strict division? And so for the single issues, in order to attract more people to them, like Camp Beagle maybe, then veganism shouldn't be mentioned, and it shouldn't really be part of it.
Well, it doesn't. The fact that Camp Beagle have they have information there about veganism. Certainly, I've been there and seen it on occasion.
But it is true, isn't it, that some people are opposed to that, aren't they? They prefer to keep it.
I haven't really heard of anyone really being opposed to that.
Okay.
To be quite honest. And I think that
see that's what I'm saying. That's the difference, because you go back 20 years and you're going to get people. This is nothing to do with veganism, right? And
I mean, there may still be people resistant, but you see, I think what people need to understand is why do these things exist? Why have we got animal experimentation? Why have we got dog racing? Why have we got hunting? What is the fundamental reason all these things happen? And the fundamental reason that all these things happen is human supremacism. The fact that humans think they're more important than other animals, and therefore it's okay to oppress and exploit other animals. In fact, I think supremacism as a whole is the cause of all oppression, not just the oppression of other animals by humans, but the oppression of humans by humans, of one group of humans by another. It's to do with the fact that one group of humans think they're more important than or more entitled than the other group, isn't it? That's where it all comes from supremacism. And so we kind of have to challenge that, and you to me, you challenge that through promoting veganism. And I think that, I'd like to see, it's very difficult to say, someone's like really kind of, their thing is campaigning against hunting, or their thing is campaigning against animal experiments, or maybe campaigning against dog racing. I wouldn't say to them, well, look, stop campaigning against that. I would say, well, how can you integrate vegan education into your campaign? Rather like we did. How can you do that? And I also think single issues can be used on the street to promote veganism, because they attract people. I mean, like for many years, I did stalls. I was involved in campaigning for whales and dolphins, against the kind of hunting and killing of whales and dolphins. And so I'd go round, like, used to do it in like the West Midlands area of England, doing street stalls, information stalls about it, and getting people to sign petitions and that. But when somebody came up to the stall, I'd obviously give them leaflets about the whales and dolphins, but I'd always give them leaflets promoting veganism as well. I kind of gave them a pack, and so I kind of used that single issue to attract people, because at least the people that attracted to the stall kind of cared about some animals. There was something there with them to work with.
I think it's a question of single issues can be abolitionized, and the one trick to that is to think about single issue events rather than single issue campaigns. But of course, the Walthamstow thing was a campaign. But it's just that what you would think of is that the people who, on a Saturday, they might be at the stadium, but during the week, they'll be doing vegan stuff. And so in that sense, they don't tie their identity to the single issue.
Yeah, I think probably some of them would be, they would be. And that was kind of, and I think that's the case of them. I mean, we still got situations where local animal rights groups do hold demonstrations outside their local dog track, and I think that's probably, they'd be involved in kind of all sorts of stuff, But for me personally, I think if I had my time again, I also think about this, like, what would I do if I had my time again? And I think what I would do, probably right at the beginning, is I'd get involved with the Vegan Society, and I'd try and encourage them to kind of get out there more with outreach right in the early days, try and get out on the street, get people out on the street, and to kind of try and spread more information about veganism.
Well, they're not that big on it even now, are they?
No. The Vegan Society now is that their main focus is on certifying products as vegan.
Yeah, trademarks.
Most of the trademark thing. They have got like an area of their work is to do with like community volunteers, and they've started doing that now, and I think that's
but the pioneers of the society, they saw themselves as campaign. They used to go on lecture tours and stuff, and they saw themselves as campaigners.
Yeah, I think I'm not. Yeah, I mean they did. They used to go and talk to people, and I saw people did go vegan because of the talks that the founders of the Vegan Society did. But I'm thinking more about something that's perhaps even more grassroots, and like the idea of street stalls and stalls at different events in local areas, and getting the message right down to the grassroots, and trying to kind of promote and organize that. I mean, the Vegan Society didn't do that, and they kind of they've sort of started doing that a bit now, but there are other organisations that do that more. For instance, Viva. I'd say the main organisation here in Britain that kind of does the most in terms of street outreach and stuff isn't the Vegan Society. It's actually Viva.
Yeah, well, I guess
and Animal Aid to some extent as well.
Yeah, I suppose some logic would be was no point in duplicating what's going on already just because it's in the name of veganism. I suppose there's some logic to that. Right then, young man, we've made it through another show, and when are we coming back? Presumably, we're not going to have.
Well, I don't really know whether we'll be back again next Tuesday or not. I'm not really sure. We'll have to have a discussion and see. I mean,
yeah, I think we will. Yeah.
If you don't see us for a couple of weeks, don't start worrying, because
no,
you probably are still alive.
Send cakes and money and stuff. So so right. So thanks everybody for. It's funny actually. The numbers have been down today, so that's a telling thing in terms of like if you're regular,
Well, yeah, because people probably thought, oh, they've gone now. They're probably not alive. So
Yeah,
that
we've gone now. Yeah, we're.
But we try and think of a. We were thinking of maybe doing a news show this week, but
Yeah,
there
we
was,
might do a new show soon.
there's not been an
So,
awful lot of interesting news, but there might be by
yeah,
next
so
time.
come on, people, create some news, and then we'll cover it.
Yes.
Right, Ronnie. Thanks for your account of that interesting.
But there we go. But I think the something that I'd like to end on really is that and this article we did about the Walthamstow closing. There's a line that says, to hold large demonstrations outside such tracks requires a considerable number of participants, but leafleting sessions can be successfully carried out by just a few people at a time. See, now, and I think that's a very important sentence, because I think that kind of applies to vegan outreach as well, and how people should be thinking like more broadly about how to do outreach. Because obviously, one thing I'm always saying is that we need far more vegans to be involved in outreach. And I think what people need to remember is you don't need a big load of people all together with, holding laptops and, having a big display in order to do effective outreach. It can be done, one or two people can do an information stall. One person can go delivering door dropping leaflets. You don't need huge numbers to be effective. And so I think that's another lesson from this that can be learned in kind of spreading the vegan message as well, that you don't need you don't need to wait for big numbers. If you wait for big numbers, you probably end up never doing anything. We have to really we kind of have to look at how we can be really effective with small numbers. That's the answer.
To do with being proactive, I suppose. Really,
it is. Yes. Yeah.
And you're proactive, and you're also pro-activism. So it's the
absolutely. That's
it's the usual message, and I know that you like to always finish with that. So thanks for that, Ron. And thanks for everybody who's stuck with us. And we'll see you pretty soon. If not next week, it'll be the week after. But it certainly won't be another month. So thanks for tuning in, and bye for now.